welcome back to another video. If you're new, I'm Charli and I have been filming some commentary videos, so if you're keen on that, keep on watching, but I'm just gonna get into it. I can't do these intros, let's just skip them. I say out with the intro.
December, every sign has its own mode. I was in love with the Sagittarius. See the emotions you put me through. From Capricorn to Aquarius. They all got their different
2024 is the year of the recession, with the UK just coming out of a recession, Australia seeming to be sort of hovering on the border of a recession, the US very slow economic growth. All I'm hearing about is recessions. I literally see it in the news every single day. Quite frankly, I'm bored of it. I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it, love. But that's just the current state of play. And yet our music right now is literally insane. It's so electronic. It's so dancey. It's so upbeat. It's so hyper pop coded. And it's just such a strange dichotomy. Why is it that we're craving this hyper pop sound while our economy is quite literally in the gutter? This year, Charli XCX's new album has taken the internet by storm, with its hyperpop soundtrack, internet cultural references, and personal yet nonchalant and catchy lyrics. Although it doesn't appear to match the current economic circumstances, namely the bleakness of them, theories suggest that the popular appreciation for upbeat and fast-paced music during recessions is actually common and to be expected, and it even has a term, recession pop. Now, I've been seeing a lot of online discourse as well about the apparent disconnect between craving this club-coded, popular, hyper-pop music, despite the fact that in my day-to-day life, all I want to do is rot in bed. There seems to be an apparent conflict between desiring a brat summer, yet staying inside and doing nothing, or wanting to be that 365 party girl, but not knowing what the point of everything is at the end of the day. And I think this is really interesting, and it kind of gets to the core of what I'm trying to look into. This apparent disconnect between the music that we're craving right now and the internal uncertainty and confusion because of our economic and political circumstances at the current time. So, what even is a recession? Why does it matter? Why am I talking about this? Why am I being your economics professor for the day? What is going on? Why are you even watching this? You don't care about recessions, but you're here now, so now you do. And there's nothing you can do about it. Anyway, so I did some research and I got out my old economics textbook. Just kidding, I did not do that because that would have been literally traumatic. But I did go on the Reserve Bank of Australia's Explainer page for some information. So please enjoy because it was really insightful. A recession is defined as a period in time where output is reduced, spending declines, and there is a significant increase in the unemployment rate. It's really, for the most part, as simple as that. Essentially, it's just where people are unable to pay back loans, debts seem extremely high, we're tightening our budgets because we're focusing on paying off those debts. There are obviously a bunch of other factors as well, but for the broad brush, very basic level recession explainer, that's all that's really necessary for this video. I will say though that a technical recession are where these poor economic conditions last for 2 consecutive quarters, which is 6 months. And that is important because it's very confusing when we're hearing all of this discourse among politicians about whether or not we're in a recession, if we're almost in a recession. And it's all very confusing when at the end of the day, the general population is just feeling very uncertain about our economic circumstances and it doesn't feel good. Like we're not feeling like we're in a prosperous time. So to be told that no, but we're not in a recession yet can be very confusing when our economic circumstances don't necessarily feel that way. Another really important thing to note is that there is also quite a lot of debate among economists about how long a period really does need to be for it to be considered a recession, and whether or not it even needs to be a time-specific period as well. And there are a number of issues which we really don't need to get into. I did find this really interesting though, because in an essay entitled The Vibe Session, The Self-Fulfilling Prophecy, the author Kyla Scanlon said that currently it feels that the only certainty is uncertainty. The only conviction is the lack thereof, and the only path forward is with a blindfold. And I think that regardless of whether we're in a technical recession or not, that is the general sentiment right now among the population. And that's really the main takeaway from this whole discussion, because what I'm interested in is not the economic circumstances per se, but why we're going from such a state of hopelessness to seek out this really uproarious, fun music. So Why are we seeking hype music instead of sad music when our economic circumstances do not reflect the sounds that we're hearing on the radio right now? So recession pop was actually a term that was coined during the global financial crisis. And this was when pop music was at an all-time high. It was super dancey, super electronic. It actually generated electronic dance music, EDM, as a complete own style of music. We're thinking Kesha, David Guetta, Black Eyed Peas, all of the big names. And to me, this period, because I was in primary school during this era, and this period is like classic year 6 disco. 5 p.m, you were in the school gymnasium. I'm setting the scene. You were all in Converse. Half the school was probably wearing some variation of galaxy print leggings. Glow sticks were out. Glow sticks everywhere, adorned in glow sticks. And the song of the hour was TikTok. That, to me, is recession pop. Typically, the term seems to cover music released between the years of 2008 and 2012, influenced by a very strong electronic sound, lyrics that were encouraging us to forget our troubles, only live for one night only, dance till the sun comes up. Nothing mattered except tonight, according to these pop artists. And I think that this was really popularized because the global financial crisis had shown a lot of us that literally anything could happen. We couldn't predict what was going to happen in a couple of months to our economic security, let alone the next day. Hope that tonight would at least be a good night, because whatever happened tomorrow, we wouldn't be certain of. Research also shows that music during the global financial crisis was actually of a higher beat per minute, BPM, than any other era. And this was a consistent finding throughout periods of recessions. During recessions, music tends to be, or at least popular music tends to be, of a higher BPM than periods of economic prosperity. And we'll get into that a little bit later and how that relates to music in the past sort of 10 or so years, but that's just a little teaser for the future. Perhaps what also made this era so significant and memorable was it wasn't only the GFC in 2008, but also, do you guys remember when in 2012 we all thought the world was going to end? Because that was a thing. There was a Mayan hypothesis that in 2012 the whole world was just going to end. And I actually think this did add to the whole mystique of the era and the confusion and concern about what was going on around us. Because even if it was just a bit of a joking sentiment that maybe not everyone earnestly believed, it was still at the back of our minds. Just this whole idea of uncertainty was plaguing us. And I think for that reason, this music of a higher BPM and more upbeat sound just really, really kicked off. In an article by Dazed, the author Olivia Bennett wrote that periods of recessions have typically always been defined by music with faster, frenetic melodies and hooky lyricism, colouring economic hardship with relentless optimism. Think the Great Depression of the 1920s and 30s, which saw the popularisation of blues and swing, and the UK's winter of discontent from the 70s to the 80s, which ushered a punk and disco. In fact, during the Great Depression of the 1920s, I found out that the song called Life is a Bowl of Cherries was one of the most popular songs, which is interesting because life certainly was not a bowl of cherries during that time. It definitely feels that in times of economic hopelessness, we turn to areas of popular culture perhaps that are free or at low cost to escape. And that would certainly include music. In an article entitled The Psychological Functions of Music Listening, the authors wrote that we all hear the music we like as something special, as something that defies the mundane, takes us out of ourselves, puts us somewhere else. Thus, music may provide a means of escape. Music is nostalgic. It takes us to places that we used to be or that we've already been when times were better. It also takes us to places that don't exist or that they're in our imagination, hypotheticals about the future, what the future could be. And for that reason, it's really, really powerful tool in changing people's minds and changing moods about our current circumstances. It makes the day go by better. It's literally one of my favorite ways to get to and from work, to forget my day and also to distract myself from the fact that I'm about to go to work. It helps us find purpose in the trenches. Yet it's definitely not only the music itself that offers the escapism, but the communities that music fosters. And I think this is really interesting because music is a very, very, very powerful social tool as well as a powerful mood changer. In rave culture, for example, which is typically sort of associated with recessions as well, given that parties tend to be held in not-for-profit areas such as abandoned warehouses or empty farms. Strong communities and identities are formed. In an article I read published by Refinery 29, it was explained that in the late noughties, electronic dance music culture offered an escapism and preferred political choice or environment to the undesirable reality of a society in unrest, suggesting that this culture offered something more than just a social connection and escapism, but that it also offered an ability to identify oneself in a political way as well. The article went on to quote Sarah Riley's 2010 study, which was an investigation into clubbing as a form of alternative political participation. Essentially, in this study, because I went to go and have a look because it sounded really fascinating, Riley interviewed people in southwest England who participated in electronic dance music culture, finding that the drive for participation in that culture was rooted in community and autonomy as well as the pursuit of pleasure. And she said that these themes were relevant to social and political participation, particularly in times of hardship and political unrest. So, fast forwarding to pre-pandemic times, just before COVID, Australia and the United States were in a period of economic boom or an economic peak. We were at the top of the business cycle. Our day-to-days were categorized by a little bit more spending. There was also a little bit less unemployment, so we were feeling more secure in our jobs as well. We were also hearing a lot of singer-songwriter music. Think Taylor Swift's album Reputation, Ed Sheeran's song Shape of You, which came out in 2017, Adele's Hello, and Harry Styles' album Harry Styles, with Sign of the Times literally taking the internet by storm at that time. I haven't actually heard of economic peak pop, and I'm not about to coin a term, but maybe I am. You had it here first. But I'm also not trying to make any crazy correlations, but I just think it's really interesting to talk about this period of potentially singer-songwriter coded music just before the recession, or like the period of a recession, particularly in the context of it being an economic peak. Essentially, all of the songs of this time, or a lot of the songs of this time, were very introspective, sentimental, and emotional. They were slower paced, potentially popular also because we had the time and space to actually ruminate and engage with the emotional lyrics. Our emotional cups were a lot less full, and so we could sacrifice a little bit of time from our days to have a little cry to a good song. Now, in 2022, notably, after a series of economic crises, including, of course, the pandemic, a few recession pop style articles began cropping up again on social media, in different media companies. The musical appetite had shifted once again to a more upbeat sound. Had Drake's album Honestly Nevermind, which had a way more house-focused sentiment than ever before. We had Beyonce's album Renaissance. We had Doja Cat and Dua Lipa, who were... Dua Peep. Sorry, I can't not do that meme. We had those two artists who are absolutely thriving during this period. And I think this goes to show that we were craving at the time a more electronic, a more perhaps meaningless sound, especially in relation to Doja Cat. I really think she reminded us of the GFC recession pop era with her nonsensical and fun lyrics, but that was what we wanted. We didn't want meaning in our music anymore. We needed something absolutely silly and fun because our economic circumstances were just not giving anymore. But I think that it wasn't anywhere near as significant, particularly in the recession pop sort of space, as it is now in 2024. And that's where I'm going to get into the pop princesses of 2024. So currently we are undeniably existing in brat summer. Not me, I'm in winter because I'm in Australia, but I'm in my brat winter. And by brat summer, I'm of course referencing Charli XCX's new album Brat, which earned its position at number 3 of the Billboard 200 and is undeniably her best performing album yet, despite her cult following since 2010, with obviously songs like Boom Clap, I Love It, and Boys, who also earned sort of more popular attention from the general population. In an article by The Atlantic called The Espresso Theory of Gender Relations, the term brat was defined as seeming a little immature, a little selfish, and a little nasty, and I would add that it's also couched in quite a lot of glamour. I think by brat in 2024, when I'm thinking of it, I'm not thinking of the brattish selfish, nasty little child who's kicking her brother. I'm thinking of the Bratz dolls, like the feminine, hyper feminine, independent, silly, rave party girl image that those dolls were representing at the time. Yet Charli not only showcases this sort of fierce and feisty persona, but also a really introspective and personal one in her album. From 360, which basically is all about how she's the biggest icon in the industry essentially, to songs like Girl So Confusing, where she talks about how strange it is to be in an industry that is so keen on pitting women against other women and not allowing more than one woman to succeed. I really think we get a broad spectrum of emotional experience, all the while maintaining this upbeat and catchy sound. This is exactly what I think separates it from the GFC recession pop era, where the main goal seemed to be just to ensure that we were forgetting our troubles and ignoring any negative emotion at all, where the tone was literally just to dance all night, full stop, nothing else, don't even consider it. This era instead marries that kind of sentiment of forgetting your troubles and encouraging people to dance and enjoy life, while also allowing for that internal confusion and conflict, I suppose. I think this is what really has caught the attention of Gen Z, where the overarching sentiment online definitely appears that Gen Z is a really confused generation. And I'm not saying that like no other generation is confused, but I think that we've been brought up in an environment where everything is uncertain right now. Like a lot of us are reaching adulthood. I've seen lots of commentary videos about how we're reaching our midlife crisis. Oh my God. We're reaching our quarter life crises. And that's creating a lot of uncertainty and confusion among our generation. And so I think that Charli's tapped into that while also embracing the recession pop sound. In the same Dazed article that I quoted earlier, Bennett said that when you consider the successful pop records of the past year, it's this delicate balance between raging party hits and deeper emotional reflection that's the winning formula. And I think Charli's just cornered this perfectly. But of course, it's not only Charli who's making strides in this particular area of pop right now. Last year, Chappell Roan earned massive popularity with her album, The Rise and Fall of a Midwest Princess, described by Pitchfork as a bold and uproarious pop project stitched with stories about discovering love, sex, and oneself in a new place. Her sound reminds me of an 80s synth vibe with a modern spin, and I'm so obsessed with it. I love it so much, and I think her album and music has been brought to the forefront again of the industry with her new song Good Luck Babe, which I think a lot of people have discovered her off of. She sings of queer love, femininity, exploring identity, exploring relationships. She's really relatable, and she's able to capture a different aspect of the population essentially by uplifting and amplifying more minority experiences. She's really become a voice for a lot of people who haven't seen themselves in pop music for a very long time, and I think that's really, really awesome. She's been described and described herself as every celebrity's favorite artist. With Chappell, I think what distinguishes her from the GFC era of dancing all night till the sun comes up is specifically what I was saying before about how she manages to uplift voices that haven't seen themselves in the industry before. And I think this is really amazing because she's expressing a complete individuality of herself. It's very, very clear that Chappell is completely herself through her music, through her Instagram, social media, through her performances. We're seeing these amazing female artists who are rejecting what the industry expects of them and rejecting those boxes that especially female pop artists have been put into for so long. In an era online where relatability is essentially a currency, I spoke about it in my previous video when I was referencing Emma Chamberlain and luxury fashion brands and how they're capitalizing off of relatable influences to try and bring Gen Z in. I think that it's the best thing that pop singers and pop artists can do right now is to showcase their individuality and relatability, because ultimately that's what Gen Z wants right now. We want to see ourselves in artists and Chappell is doing that so incredibly well. And of course, we can't forget Sabrina Carpenter either. Her release Please 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 topped the Hit 100 in its second week of release, which was followed shortly by her neo-disco hit Espresso at number 4. She's also just dropped her tracklist for her new album Short and Sweet. She embraces this hyper feminine and flirty attitude, especially when she's performing on the Eras tour, where she changes the lyrics of her song Nonsense at the very end to match the location that she's performing in. For example, in Berlin, she said, "Me degrading you, boy, I'm just flirting. One too many stutters, I'll be twerking. You got some big old brats out in Berlin." Brats. And we always come full circle, ladies. Charli, Chappell Roan and Sabrina Carpenter have been described as the brash female artists of our generation, creating a new generation of pop music. It really feels like something has shifted in the water that these pop singers are drinking, and we're seeing something different and new. And I really do think it feels different to 2022. Personally, 2022 for me wasn't a particularly notable era of music. I mean, obviously Doja Cat, always notable. In Abby Chatfield's podcast, It's a Lot, she was talking about this new wave of female pop princesses essentially, and she sort of described it as women who are being appreciated by the general population for their depth rather than being female pop artists that have been curated by the industry, for example. These artists are reclaiming their hyper femininity and they're rejecting the caricatures that have been pushed on female artists for so long. Think of like Paris Hilton and her super high-pitched voice, and only recently we've found out that she doesn't even speak that way. Or Britney Spears and what she went through in the industry. I just think it's really interesting to see that people can still be hyper feminine, but in a way that is authentic to them. It doesn't have to be put on them by the industry. We also see this in the lyrics of these artists' songs as well. Like in Charli's 360, she literally opens with, "I went my own way and I made it. I'm your favorite reference, baby," reflecting her overarching iconicness, if that's even a word, in the industry. Even her cover art is a statement of rejection against industry expectations. When she released her cover art, the iconic green with black Arial font literally just saying brat, a lot of people had criticism and something to say because it wasn't the typical album cover that you see from female pop artists where at least their body or their face is the main focus point. So while clubbing music appears to be at an all-time high, it would make sense that clubbing itself would be as well. And yet we're seeing a complete distancing from Gen Z from the clubbing scene. Gen Z is less interested in clubbing and nightlife than ever, which is really fascinating despite this desire for upbeat music. So I wanted to look into this a little bit further to try and figure out whether or not it's due to our economic circumstances or whether or not it's something a little bit deeper. In an article for The Guardian by Gabby Hinslipp, she outlined that Gen Z seems to be less interested in going out because of social media. We're connecting with our friends online, experiencing communities in online spaces rather than in the real world, and we can also experience communities that have been created from an appreciation for the same music, especially with the memification of music. For example, with Brat, we're literally seeing so much content on Instagram, at least I know I am, and on social media and on TikTok of the memification of Brat. You don't have to actually be the iconic rave girl and go to a rave or a club to be a Brat girl. You're part of the trend without having to actually leave your bed. The article said that in Australia, one survey found that 71% of Gen Z had cut back on going out. And in South Korea, similar statistics actually led to concern about reclusive youths who rarely leave their homes, prompting the government to propose a monthly allowance of $490 in an attempt to reintegrate the depressed, quote-unquote hermit-like young. The article then referenced Manchester in the UK, which boasts Europe's highest student population. Saoirse Lord, the nighttime economy advisor of the Mayor of Greater Manchester, said that she thought that students were clearly feeling the economic pinch as well, and said that rather than going out to those big events, students are buying bottles of vodka at Sainsbury's and having house parties. Of course, that's nothing new, but it's just an interesting shift if those students used to be going out all of the time. The mayor himself thought that even young people with disposable funds seem to be more inclined to save it for one memorable moment rather than going out every single night. Now, I also just want to give a very quick content warning because I am just about to discuss some potentially distressing themes of SA, and so skip ahead if you don't want to engage in that content. Another reason for the potential drawback of Gen Z from going out clubbing is the fear that being a victim of nightlife harm when out clubbing or at late night venues is a genuine, real fear, and something that a lot of Gen Z and a lot of anyone who goes out does need to be aware and alert about. In research by Desperados, it found that 80% of Gen Z admitted to feeling worried about this, and 83% were found to have experienced nightlife harm in some form. Statistics in London obtained by Time Out outlined that reports of SA in London bars, pubs and nightclubs and music venues was at a 6-year high, and that was in 2021. Now, I didn't find updated data for 2024, but I'm sure if you did some digging, you would find some. And my general hypothesis is that it's not much better. In the context of that, it's certainly not just a financial position that people aren't going out, and it's also certainly not just the fact that we have phones and we're on our phones all the time. There's a very real and very serious reason and very sinister reason for why Gen Z are opting not to go out as much. And I think it actually speaks to the smartness of Gen Z right now. If there's a genuine threat of going somewhere, it's the most smart decision not to go there. And this is a serious issue that for so long hasn't been addressed by the nightlife industry. For so long, the nightlife industry has fostered an absolutely appalling environment when it comes to safety, and quite frankly, more needs to be done about it if you're trying to get Gen Z through the doors. So despite the fact that we might not be making it out clubbing to experience and enjoy this music as much, it seems that another way to experience and enjoy this music is quite literally by buying into the trend, but not by buying music, by buying fashion that matches up with the music. With Charli's new album Brat, we've not only seen a rise in popularity for the Brat sound, but a rise in the entire Brat aesthetic, encapsulating not only fashion trends and makeup trends, but a whole way of life. Fashion brands have hopped on to profit off of Charli's success almost as soon as the album came out, with pieces in the shade of neon green from brands like Balenciaga and Coperni, and then of course other fast fashion brands adopting this whole aesthetic as well and using it to try and sell a particular sort of more edgy style of clothing, literally just tying it with the word brat, and you're going to get more sales and more clicks. And even Charli herself posted on Instagram recently sharing that she'd released her own specific storefront sharing official brat merchandise, which I find to be really interesting in the context of us being in a recession right now. Instead of going to the club and enjoying the music and actually listening to the music and being the rave girl that the music talks about, you can just buy into it. This, of course, isn't specific to Brat Summer. It's been a thing for the past few years, especially off the back of very fast fashion trend cycles, which have been exacerbated by TikTok and social media. We saw this last year with Barbie, the movie, and then the whole trend of girlhood and Barbie pink and trends like coquette in fashion, which then took off the back of the actual movie itself. However, I do think that in the context of it being almost a recession, at least not an economically prosperous time, it is interesting that Charli decided to release her own merchandise. I also think the timing of the release was potentially a little bit too late, because in the interim we already saw a lot of other people hopping onto this trend. For example, the actual merchandise that Charli's selling are just baby t-shirts which say the word brat in the same font as her album, and we've seen so many people that have just gone and made those t-shirts themselves. The t-shirts themselves are priced at $60 each, and the general sentiment in Charli's Instagram comments was that they're way too expensive. Girl, we're bumping that debt right now, we cannot afford. Girl, your fans are unemployed. Capitalism is a knife, and girl, the prices are too high. I do wonder whether or not the jump from Charli's team into the fashion side of things was a necessary call. Fashion trend cycles are so freaking quick. If something is particularly popular at a given time, you can guarantee it's going to be very unpopular quite soon. TikTok as well, making those trends way more popular than they ever needed to be, so that we see them way too much and then we get sick of them. That's the lay of the land at the moment with the fashion industry. But to conclude, I really don't think we're going to be seeing this trend go away. I think we're going to be hearing this type of upbeat sound for some time. Whether or not we're at the peak of the new wave recession pop right now, or whether or not the peak is yet to come, we will soon see and soon find out. But I do think it's really interesting, and I think that as long as uncertainty, at least in the economic and political space, remains, we're possibly going to be seeing a more upbeat, fun, musical sound in pop music. Recessions impact different demographics differently and at different times, so we may indeed be hearing this sound for the next couple of years, who knows, or we may go back to a more songwriter time. I'd be really interested to know though what you think, and whether or not you think this really is a new wave of recession pop, or whether or not you just think it's a trend and we're not going to be seeing it anymore, and that we're actually all going to get sick of this type of thing and we're going to move on to something completely different. That would be really interesting if that's what you think, so please let me know in the comments. But yeah, thank you so much again for watching. Absolutely have been loving reading your comments on all my videos. I really, really appreciate the engagement. If you want to see more from me, hit subscribe, give this video a like, and I will see you as always in my next video. Bye!
Every sign has its own mode. I wasn't